Hello and welcome to House of Cult. My name is Alessandro, and with me is Ariel Salsa, the owner and founder of the Pretty Cult. Today we are so stoked to welcome the Duke of Spook himself, Wednesday 13, who is set to release his 10th studio album, Mid-Death Crisis, this Friday, April 25th, via Napalm Records. Thanks so much for jumping on, man. How's the day going?
It's just kind of starting. We're about to have sound check. We're in Pittsburgh today. I'm in a smelly backstage area, but it's a quiet place for the moment, so it's good.
Right on, man. Well, let's jump right into it. Mid-Death Crisis is your 10th studio album. That's a
Mhm.
major milestone. After all these years, as an artist that's been a part of so many different projects as well, what still kind of fuels the fire for you creatively and keeps you pushing forward, making what I feel is arguably your strongest record in years? There's such an
Thank you.
urgency and fun factor with, of course, like sincerity. And it feels like this fun factor has kind of been missing in rock music in recent years. And it feels very refreshing and very much like you, but very timeless, due in large part to you not sort of following the trends in some ways of the modern music industry landscape and sort of staying true. Would you sort of agree with that?
Yeah, I think so. I think having fun is something that a lot of people have forgot uh, how to do it,
Yeah.
and including myself. I went through a couple of records and tours and years where I think or know I wasn't doing what I set out to do in the very beginning. And so this album is a return back to that. And it wasn't anything hard to do. It was natural. I mean, just going back and doing these Murder Doll songs over the last year and a half sparked up the music again. And so it was just easy to go back into that. And it was also something I wanted to do. I was having fun, and you can tell on this record that I had fun with it. And but to answer your question, what drives me and keeps me going, I think it's the fact that I said this the other day to someone, and they kind of giggled, and I went, "Well, it's just kind of the truth." It's like I've never made it in a sense. You know what I mean? Like I haven't made Metallica level. I haven't made I haven't even made a Papa Roach level of success. I don't have a hit. I never so for me, this is just I'm still trying to make it, if that makes sense. It's kind of like I mean, I've got my foot in the door of this industry, but there's still a million people out there that have no idea who I am. I think that's what drives me is because I never really feel like I've made it. I've never got comfortable. I've so that's always going to be a thing where with me. It's just I never. I still want more. And my fans. They're still here for me, and they drive me as well. So it's a little bit of both of that.
That's so wild to think about considering, as somebody that's followed your career for so long, that you still have that hunger and that drive as if you were just starting. That's so wild to think about.
It is. I mean, it's every record, everything. I mean, because and I said it to someone. I was like, I haven't made it in the industry standard of what has made it. I don't tour on a tour. We tour in an RV in the States because we don't. So it's still a struggle. It's still but I'm not complaining about it. I mean, I think that's what's kept the drive with me. Maybe that's what has. I think that's what has kept the spark. 10 albums in, and I think that's what happens with some bands where, you know, they're hungry in the beginning, and then they get spoiled, and they lose that hunger, and they lose that drive. And I've never lost that.
Yeah, absolutely. And currently you are on the There's No Such Thing as Monsters tour right now.
Mhm.
And it's also doubling as a 20th anniversary for Transylvania and 90210. What has it sort of been like revisiting that era while also showcasing, this brand new record as well, too? How important was it for you to have, a new album out during this anniversary tour, essentially kind of keeping one foot in the past and the other in the present, in tandem?
Um, it's not that odd. I feel like this new album sort of stands right up with the first album. So when we're playing a majority of this new album on this tour, and then we go into a new song, it's not like we take a crazy left turn. It just feels like we're just continuing with that record, and I think the fans sense that instantly. So this record is not that I tried to imitate or replicate exactly what I did on my first album, but I think the vibe and the spirit of that is still there. Like I played it for one of my old members that was on my old member Kid who was on the first album, and I played him a couple of the songs, and he said to me it felt like he just hit pause in time from the
Yeah,
Transylvania era, and that was a cool uh, reaction, from him because he was there during that. So yeah, I feel like I got as close to home as I could, and I like to call that first album home because that's where I feel like I had the right ingredients that was in the laboratory correctly there, and I kind of just wanted to go back to that, and I think I got as close as I could.
I love that. That's so cool. That's amazing.
Yeah, that's
Thank you.
sick. Let's, dive into the writing and recording process, obviously, of Mid-Death Crisis. What was kind of your creative process like for this record? And I also read that the first Wednesday 13 album was written entirely by you.
Mhm.
That this is the first, excuse me, Wednesday 13 album written entirely by you. How liberating is it to take that approach? And why do you feel like that was the logical path for you for this record?
Well, with the first album, I wrote and did everything myself on the first album. I mean, when I first started doing Wednesday 13, I didn't know what it was going to be. It was me. There was no band, so I just went in my
Mhm.
basement and wrote all those songs, and that's what you hear on that first album. Was a lot of that music, and a lot of people don't know, but the second Murder Dolls album, a lot of that music for that album was written during that time too. So I didn't have a band. I just went in and wrote songs.
Yeah.
And when it came time to do this album, my longtime guitarist had parted ways with the band, and I was back to doing the guitar work again, which I hadn't done in several records. So when it came time to write this, mentally, I was like, you know what, I have to do this by myself. I did the first one by myself. I didn't have a band. Let's go in with that same mentality. I'm going to write the music. Then I'll bring it to my band and we'll arrange it and do the studio stuff. But I didn't want to sit down and write with anyone, so to speak, and go, oh, let's come up with a song together. I wanted to scrape my cranium and get all the good out of there and scrape every pumpkin seed out of here, and that's what I did. And then I brought it to the band and said, all right, these are the songs. Let's arrange them, and that's how we did it. So that's why it said in the press release I did it by myself. It wasn't like me trying to go, this ego, I have to do it by myself. I just basically
Fair,
saying
yeah.
I felt how I did my first album was I was alone, and I had to see if I could make a new album by myself in that same way, and that was the main goal for me, was to do that, and I think I achieved it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
for sure.
sometimes I feel like as artists too, we kind of have to, while I do clothing, not music, sometimes we just kind of have to go, even though we do stuff with other people and it
Mhm.
is no ego, it's like you got to go off and really like push yourself and like
Yeah,
really, like you said, scrape your brain and push yourself and give yourself a challenge, especially when you've been doing it for so long. So it's really cool, and totally makes sense that from the first
yeah,
album and then this one you were like, hey, I want to sit down and just do this myself.
yeah. And that was the thing, is like, I again, I wanted it to reflect what 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 I did in the beginning. Like I said, once
Mhm.
Wednesday 13 got started, and album 4, 5, and 6, it became more of a band, and everybody was doing their thing, and I was doing less of what I did in the beginning.
Mhm.
And I listen to my fans. Some people go, "Oh, you shouldn't listen to comments," but I mean, that's what I do. I listen to people, and
Yeah.
some people will say, "Oh, your newer albums don't really sound like the first ones," and I'm like, "You're right, they don't."
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was the point. But this one, I consciously said, let's see if I can write a record like this. Let's see if it's still in me to write that kind of music. And I feel like this is, like I said, as close as I could have got to it.
Absolutely. My personal favorite tracks on the record are I Hurt You and My Funeral, and even In Misery as well too, because they show such a vulnerable side to you in the midst of, sort of the fun and kind of
Mhm.
sleazy horror theatrics? How do you sort of approach blending the campy theatrical elements with those deep and genuine expressions of emotion? Does it feel almost easier to express that vulnerability because it's sort of wrapped up in that horror imagery?
It's easier to do that, yes, and when it's wrapped that way. But I don't know. I've always like the songs you just mentioned, like "In Misery" and "I Hurt You." Those are what I call the Wednesday 13 ballads,
Yeah.
so to speak. The sad ballads.
Mhm.
And I just feel like I've put those in all my records. There's one on the first album. There's you have "Haunt Me" on the first album. You have "Curse of Me" on the second record. "Skeletons" on the third album. There's always a those songs, and I don't know why, but I just feel like my records have to have those. This album got two of them.
Yeah.
And both of those songs, "I Hurt You" and "In Misery," I was kind of torn between which one of those to release as a single because I thought they were both really strong.
Mhm.
Um, but I like both of those songs a lot, and I think that's what makes the record diverse because you do have a fun, fast-paced record, and then you get to those songs, and it sort of takes you in a dark corner for a minute. And my funeral too. That was the first song I wrote for the record. That was the first
Mm.
song that I wrote and went, all right, this is a good one. Now I'll write 12 more songs around it or something. And that title was originally was going to be the record name of the record. I had a whole theme for it, but
Mm.
as everything, it always changes. So either way, I had a really good creative process this time on this record.
For sure. And like speaking of like the fun, kind of fast, like urgent songs, No Apologies really stands
Mhm.
out. It has my favorite riff on the entire record, I would say.
Thank you. Thank you.
Um, and it's so cool to hear a song like this in 2025. And sort of walk me through this track and the experience of working with Tame Down from Faster Pussycat. What made you sort of want to get him on the song and what did he sort of bring to the table? And I also, read that you grew up on the music of Faster Pussycat.
Yeah, I mean, I started playing guitar when I was 11, 12 years old, and I was listening to LA Sunset Strip hair metal. I was listening to LA Guns and
Yep.
Faster Pussycat, of course, Guns N' Roses and all that. It was already out, and that was the music that I liked. So I wanted to learn how to play guitar like that. So I learned how to play guitar to the first Faster Pussycat cassette and CD. I had one of those tablature books, and I learned how to read it. And I learned every note on their first album, and
Wow.
I could play along to it. And at that point, I thought, okay, I know how to play guitar. I can play this whole record. And that really was kind of the only lessons and stuff I learned. I learned how to play lead guitar off their album, and that was really kind of my only guitar lesson stuff I had. So I sort of credit them. I've always credited them. And then when I was in the studio last year recording this song, our producer kept calling it the Faster Pussycat song because that
Yeah.
little riff reminded him of Faster Pussycat. And I'm like, well, I guess it kind of does. And he brought it up a couple of days later. He's like, maybe you should maybe hit up Tammy, get him to sing on this. That would be cool. And I was like, yeah, that's a great idea. And so I called him up and was like, would you want to do this? And he was like, I would love to. Tell me when and where. And he showed up at the studio and we knocked it out in a couple hours. We felt like we were in a band for a few hours. It was a really cool thing. It was a full circle moment for me being a fan and learning that, and then have him in the studio and I'm telling him how to sing a song. It's crazy, man. Like my life has been full of surprises like this, and so to have Tammy on my record singing along, like it says, he's one of my rock and roll heroes. I mean, he's one of the reasons I look like this. I had bleached blonde hair when I was younger because I wanted to look like him, and then I saw him dye his hair black and start wearing top hats, and I was like, hey, I can do that. And then look what I'm doing here, fucking 30 years later.
I love that's so full circle. That's
Mhm.
amazing.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah, and
beautiful.
obviously it, must feel so surreal, like that Faster Pussycat has inspired you on your journey. And you are that artist for so many people today. If you could offer advice to like the next generation discovering your music, kind of like what would that be?
I just advice for people wanting to play music or anything. I mean, it's just uh I mean, you could do anything. I mean, I'm living proof that you can have an imagination and a dream and you can achieve it. I mean, I came from a haystack in North Carolina,
Wow.
and I mean, no, I mean, that's literally the truth. And I wanted this, I had this dream. I had an imagination. And I wanted to do this, and I didn't accept any other answers but yes. And once I got into this business in 2001, 2002 with Murder Dolls, I was never going to get out of it. I got my foot in the door. And I was saying earlier, like, I feel like I've made it, but I haven't made it. So that's what always drives me. So, for advice for people is just, you can achieve anything you set your mind to, but, you also have you have to be willing to lose everything for this dream too. So, there's a price to pay on it, and I've learned that as well.
For sure. Kind of switching gears a bit, and it was a question I wanted to ask earlier, but I want to bring up now. Obviously you worked with Alex Kane, I believe yeah, as the producer for this record. But I sort of have to nerd out for a second at the fact that I read that Steve Evans mixed this record. I
Mhm.
feel like that's a really interesting choice for this record. He did personally some of my favorite hardcore records from like the 90s and early 2000s.
Oh
What
yeah.
was Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, he did a ton of incredible stuff in the 90s. And very it's very interesting. What was sort of the thought process behind having Steve mix this record? Because the record sounds incredible.
Steve killed this mix.
Yeah.
Basically, I worked with Steve on my Necrophase album.
Hmm.
He helped track the drums, and I worked with him for about 4 or 5 days in the studio just tracking drums. And I loved working with him. And the only reason we couldn't use him at the time is because I couldn't afford Steve. And so I've always had it in the back of my mind, hey, if I get a chance to get Steve to actually mix a record, I want him to do it. And when this album came up, he's the first person I thought about the mix. I was like, you know what, I need to let someone pro and awesome and do this. And I loved all the work that Steve had done with Prong. I really liked
Yeah.
all that, a lot of that. And not that I was trying to sound like Prong. I just knew that Steve was a huge Kiss fan. He's a huge
Mhm.
hair metal fan. He grew up on all that. We just connected on it, and it wasn't necessarily what he had done that I went, oh, I want you to sound just like this. I just knew that he could take what I had and make it sound right.
That's
But
that's
adding in those elements of those bands, like, I was like, hey, if you made our drums sound like that last Prong record, I wouldn't be upset. Or
yeah.
if the guitar had an attack on this song like that, so it definitely I could see some of that. But he did Amen's Coma America single, which was another
Mhm.
thing that I liked a lot. So either way, it's just Steve nailed this mix on it. I couldn't be happier with it.
Yeah, he absolutely did. And as an artist, who, we definitely feel is, everybody would agree is really keeping the spirit of what we would say, countercultural rock music alive, as it should be. What do you sort of make of the state of rock and roll today, especially as someone who has experienced so many different iterations of the music industry landscape?
It's it's reaching and I don't like to make fun. I don't make fun of bands. I don't try. There's music I don't want to listen to. I don't try to go, that sucks. People just grow up different, you know. There are kids
Mhm.
now that just they don't know what I know. They didn't grow up the way I grew up on rock and roll. So they don't have any idea the school I come from.
Yeah.
But I'm able to go out there and remind people and show them that this was something, and this is it's crazy as the more I do this, years go by, the this is going away. This sound and this it's just becoming more modern, and I don't know modern music. I don't listen to it, so I don't know how to make modern music. I don't want to make modern music. This is my soul. This is my core. This is what I grew up on, and I feel like now that this is such a different thing these days, it's a brand new thing to people. People that come and go, oh, I've never heard anything like you, and I'm like, well, we're not doing anything new. I'm just doing what I know. So I think it's going to turn around. For me, I'll be 50 next year, which is why the title's called Mid-Death Crisis. And but I got a strange feeling that I'm going to make it in my 50s as I
Yeah.
thought I would make it in my 20s, because the teenagers have found Wednesday 13. They've discovered murder dolls. On my
Hmm.
front rows are all kids with X's on their hands, and they're loving it. So I'm going to get my day in the sun. It might be right before I hit the casket though, but it's still I still got the drive in me, and it's fun, man. It really is a crazy ride my life has been so far.
Yeah, that's really cool. I mean, I feel like too, so many of these bands that are following those modern trends, I think a big fear of doing that is the music can ultimately sound dated when you do. Like
Right.
eventually in 20 years, some of those modern sounds might, similar to some of the stuff that was going on in the 80s, that may have been like
Yeah.
overproduced stuff, where it's like you listen to a Wednesday 13 record and it does feel very timeless. Like it,
I
it,
think I think so.
Mhm.
I've been really lucky. I don't know. I just I just do what I know, and luckily it has been a timeless thing. I mean, just going out and doing these Murder Doll songs that are now 23 years old. There's people love it. It's like it didn't really even fit then when we did it then. It didn't make sense when we because Murder Dolls was right at the tail end of the new metal era, and we were
yeah.
doing this sort of Misfits meets Motley Crue type. It didn't make sense. I've never really followed. I haven't. I've never followed any trends. In
Mm.
fact, if something became popular, I attacked it.
Yeah.
So yeah.
For sure. Yeah, just a couple more quick questions, but before we sort of wrap up here, we obviously have to talk horror, you know. Would love to know some of your all-time favorites, both old and new. And were there any that you found yourself watching or rewatching while making this new record? And then kind of, finishing that off, if you could write and record a soundtrack for any horror movie, what would it be?
I mean, I'm constantly watching old movies, uh, listening to old soundtracks, and it's just that's on a daily basis. On our bus, I brought my DVDs with me. At home, I've just got it 24/7 on the 8 televisions throughout my house. It's just constantly on. I don't really watch anything new.
Yeah.
I think the newest, and I'm not against new stuff.
Yeah.
I just haven't seen anything that strikes me or makes me want to go out and just wait for the next movie. It's just really hit or miss. I think the last good horror movie I saw that I really liked, it made me feel uneasy, was the movie Mandy with Nicolas Cage.
Yeah.
And Nicolas Cage was a plus to the movie, but I don't think that's why I liked it. I liked just the overall vibe of that. And the music score to that too is amazing as well. I love the music on it. I can't pronounce the guy's name that did it, but I know he did a movie called Beyond the Black Rainbow that had a
Mhm.
very similar soundtrack. And so as far as new stuff goes, that's about as new as I get. When it comes to oldie goldies, I mean, it's the classic Chainsaw 1 and 2, Halloween 1 and 2, Phantasm, Return of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, Return of the Living Dead. Those are like the ones I watch them. I know them so much. I can quote them. I know the characters. I've become friends with a lot of these people that are still alive in these movies.
Mhm.
So it's very odd that I've become, like I said, I was such a horror movie fan as a kid, and now I do these horror movie conventions, and I'm friends with the Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part Two. I'm friends with Bill Moseley and Caroline
Yeah.
Whitney. They're my friends. I literally could talk to them, and it's not just hey, I can let's go grab coffee. It's a really cool thing that I've met a lot of my musical heroes and my movie heroes now, and they're my friends. I can call them my friends.
That's so cool. I couldn't
So
imagine
cool.
like going and getting coffee with like Bill Moseley. That would be like
Man, the first time I met Bill Moseley, I was on an airplane flying to Arizona. It was me, Heather, I can't pronounce her last name correctly. Langenkamp she was Nancy from Nightmare on Elm Street.
okay.
I was in the middle, 3 seats. Nancy, me, Ogre from Skinny Puppy, Bill Moseley, and
Wow.
on the aisle, and we just talked the whole time. That's how I got to know them, and we all became friends. And Ogre's a good friend of mine as well. I remember pushing the tall man from the Phantasm movies before he passed away. I would push him around in his wheelchair at the airport and take him to his car. And right
Wow.
before he passed, I remember he had seen me, and I always had my cowboy hat on, and he said, "Young man, what is your name?" I was like, "They call me Wednesday," and he was like, because he's like, he said, "I've been seeing you around. I wanted to know your name," and I was so bizarre. The tall man wanted to know my
Wow.
name,
That
so
is
yeah. So
crazy.
I've had some crazy moments.
Yeah. That's
That's
incredible.
so cool. So cool. Kind of, too, another fun one we like to ask, which I'm excited to ask you, is someone who's obviously no stranger to exploring the horrors of the world, both real and
Mhm.
supernatural. Have you experienced anything in your life that felt like a horror movie or some unexplainable supernatural event? And maybe also use that to inspire some music.
I've did a couple of ghost hunting things in Newcastle, UK. That was some bizarre stuff. Uh, but the scariest thing I've ever been involved in my life was being in an earthquake in Japan. That was the
Wow.
most
Oh,
scariest. We were involved in that 2011
Oh my God.
tsunami. We were 200
oh,
miles away from
shit.
where that hit. So that was the most terrifying. Thought I was going to die. Thought I was in a movie. Couldn't believe this is happening to me. How uh, it was. I could do a whole other show with just telling you the guys that story.
Yeah.
But that was the most insane thing I've ever been involved in, and it messed me up for a couple of years too. I had some PTSD from that because I mean it was a 9.3 earthquake that I think it's the third biggest earthquake in recorded history to this day,
Yeah.
and that was so it wasn't a ghostly thing, but it felt like something.
Supernatural.
It did
Yeah.
not feel normal. I mean, when you
Yeah.
go outside and you can't stand up, you have to stand like you're on a surfboard to hold on to the earth.
Wow.
Something odd is going on. So I've experienced that.
I mean, that takes the
Jesus.
cake of anything we've heard. Like, that is like the
Yeah.
Scarier than any
Yeah.
craziest.
ghost story. Yeah.
Oh my God. I can't even imagine. I had no clue that, wow, that is wild, man.
Hmm.
So,
I remember hearing about it on the news.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, obviously living in California, we have some earthquakes here, but nothing, of course, to that level. And I can't even imagine.
we had one 2 weeks
Yeah, the
ago.
earthquakes in California now are, but it set me up for that. Like now, those don't even bother
Yeah.
me.
Bother
Like,
you.
I
Yeah.
mean, I'm
Yeah,
gonna say
you're
they
like,
don't bother me.
whatever.
They do. I'm just more aware. I'm more alert of it now. I'm not in
Mhm.
as much of a panic as I was because when that happened, I didn't know. I said I was still. I felt like I was still out of the haystack in North Carolina. I'm like, what's happening? What's going on here? You know.
Well, I'm so glad you made it out safely. And
Yeah.
yeah, man.
That
Wow.
you and whoever you're with was okay. That's
Yeah,
just
the whole band. It was
crazy.
Murder Dolls. We
Oh
were
my
on tour there.
God.
We played a show and it happened, and we had to cancel the rest of it and come home.
Oh
So
my
yeah.
God, man. That's
Jesus.
crazy.
Well, on a brighter note,
Mhm.
besides the new album and the current tour, our last question is what can we look forward to from Wednesday 13, right now and for the rest of 2025?
Touring.
Yeah.
Videos. We have two new music videos that you'll see. The No Apologies video will be out this week. Second video, or after that, will be a video for the song Decapitation. And that's going to be a little mini horror movie. And I'm going to try to get some of my
Ooh.
horror movie friends in
Okay.
that movie as well. So stand by for that. And then we have a summer tour in Europe, in the UK. And then we're going back to Europe and the UK at the end of the year. We have a US tour I just confirmed yesterday for the beginning of 2026. It's just nonstop touring and around the globe, and I'm excited because I'm really proud of this record, and I think my fans are going to love it. It's going to be an instant classic.
Mm-hmm. 100%, man.
Absolutely.
Wow. Congrats on everything, man. It's been such an honor to get to chat with you and just thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely, man. We'll have a great rest of your day on tour and just yeah, I hope the release goes great this Friday.
Yeah, it's a good week. All right, guys. Thank you so much.
Hell yeah. See you,
Thank
man.
you. Have
All
a
Take
good
right.
care.
one.
All right. Take care. Thank you.